Greetings and salutations. No, the wine drinking is not started yet, but yes, it is going to start soon, isn't it?
I think so.
Welcome to our Sunday theme of the month stream. It is week 4, which I hope you guys know means that we are going to be answering your questions. Our theme of the month this month has been world building scaffolding. So that's avoiding world building plot holes, integrating your magic and your special properties and any other things that you've introduced into your world, making sure that they're really properly integrated into your world building so you don't end up with some boo-boos, because we don't like world building boo-boos. No, we don't. Dimitris is going to introduce today's wine.
I am?
Because we did that last time and it was fun. So Dimitri and I are going to be answering your questions.
That's good wine.
On our... Yes, I thought we'd splash out this week. On the sofa, whilst drinking wine. So we're going to get progressively more sagacious and wise as we finish our wine.
Wise.
Mm-hmm. That's what happens.
Is that what you're going for? Wise?
I'm going for wise. Wise is what I'm going to
Wise.
for. So guys, remember to get your questions into us. To do that, you write capital letters question and then your question in the chat and we will answer your questions. Yay! Try and keep them on our theme of the month topic, which is world building scaffolding, but if there are a few from left field and we have time, we will answer those at the end. No promises. Oh,
Well, what?
Well, I guess it's time.
Okay.
Guess it's time already. Why don't you pour some wine?
I will pour some wine.
We've had some good guests this month, haven't we?
We did. It was a very interesting month.
Good, wasn't it? We had Nate from the Worldbuilding School, which was awesome. And then we had Trent Hergenrader, which was massively illuminating. Last week we had Eran Aviram. And I'm going to get all of those streams up onto YouTube in the next few days. Yeah. So you will be able to catch up on those. And I'll be cutting out all the extraneous bits as well. Did you rate the wine first? Yes, it's been breathing for a while already.
Yes.
I left it to Hoff in the corner. Cheers!
Cheers.
To world building scaffolding! And to you, fair viewer! Cheers.
Fair viewer.
I've seen those sweet beans. We had a beautiful people competition. I know that they're beautiful.
Fair enough.
Okay, so... let's crack on with a question here. Are there any tactics or techniques you would recommend in terms of world building, and particularly avoiding world building scaffolding, in a video game? In this case, an RPG video game.
World building scaffolding. Is that what you're saying?
Avoiding world building plot holes.
Okay.
So, are there any tactics or techniques you would recommend?
These are new questions for me, by the way. I've never heard them. So
these are questions that came from the first few weeks of our world building scaffolding streams, questions that were asked of us and of our special guests, but they're questions that we didn't get to answer at the time, and now we're going back and trying to revisit them. We'll also be answering the new questions from today as well. So this was a question from Nat from Gamefire.
Cool.
Very interesting.
So, a way to avoid world building plot holes. I'm guessing that I would go back to what I'm saying quite regularly, which is that if you do not sit down when you start creating your world and set for you a specific range of parameters you'll be working on and effectively decide what your theme is and what you are trying to achieve, you are going to have a problem. You are going to end up effectively having questions left unanswered for the people who are reading your book, your world.
Yeah.
And you will also have you run into the problem effectively of not having answered the questions that that are required from your articles and your setting to be answered to make it believable and playable if it is a game world or made for a tabletop game.
Yeah. One of the biggest danger points for creating world building plot holes, thank you very much. So one of the biggest danger points for that is introducing too many things and not considering carefully enough how they interact with one another.
Yeah. It is part of the world builder. It is a little bit. the idea of essentially starting adding things here and there and left and right that are not connected and that they cannot be read as a single body of work, which effectively means that you don't have world building plot holes. You kind of have holes and in between them splotches
Some
of
world building.
Yes, exactly, which is the most horrible thing that you can do, in fact.
Yeah, I was thinking of this in... No, actually, that analogy is not going to help anyone. That was a... I'm not going to go ahead with that thought
Okay,
for you
I'll
people.
give you another tip if you
Yeah,
want to.
sure.
Start by building an introduction article.
Yeah.
Because that will serve as a guideline. So,
Not only for your readers, but for you.
yeah, exactly. So effectively, go back to the introduction article and see, have I filled the questions and the concepts that I have introduced to the introduction article? And is there an easy way for people to access this information
Yeah.
in order for them to understand the world better?
Yeah, really good point.
And yeah, I mean, starting with putting some basis for you and what you want to achieve, and then writing an one-pager of the most basic concepts of your world will help you make sure that at least these are covered.
Yeah.
And the chances are that if it makes sense for you and it makes sense for your players or your closest, essentially, people who are working and seeing your world, then the chance that you have negated the chance of having plot holes.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the number one question we are asked as world builders and as creators of World Anvil is, where do I start world building?
Oh dear God, yes.
And one of the things that's come up again and again as we've talked to our guest this month, as I said, that's Nate from the Worldbuilding School, that's been Professor Trent Hergenreder, who is a professor of world building, that's been Eran Aviram, who's been working in the field for 20 years, writing and creating games and editing. They've all said the same thing this month, which is start with the user experience of your world and go from there.
Yeah.
And introduce few elements and make sure that you spin off all of the world building juju, if you like, all of the differences from First World Earth. So if your magic or your customs or your species, spin them off of a core concept, because that is going to negate world building plot holes. That's going to make sure everything is super integrated, and that's going to stop you running after pieces of content, like you said, where you end up with, instead of a net of world building, you end up with holes and bits of world building around those holes.
Yeah, like little islands in an ocean of nothing.
So start with a user experience concept, figure out where your strange comes from, whatever your strange is, whatever your hook is, and make sure that that is the source of all of your
concept building.
Exactly, all of your big hook. That doesn't mean you can't build other things, but if that's the source of all of your strange or all of your hook, whatever that is, that's going to make sure that you built a world that is rigorous and stands up to plot hole inspection.
Cool.
I mean, that's definitely...
Plot hole inspection. And you haven't even started drinking.
I want to see the outfits of the plot hole inspection police.
Yeah, it's like Inspector Gadget with a world building glove.
Yeah, absolutely.
So...
Wait, I have a question for you guys, which is, can you think of examples of media of any kind where you've seen world building plot holes? And what are those world building plot holes? So this could be, we batted around the Game of Thrones medium, whereby you have these variable lengths of seasons, like sometimes they're very long or short winters and summers. And the fact that in our world, that would kill all the vegetation. The plants would not survive. So that as an example, it doesn't affect our enjoyment of Game of Thrones, but it is something you can point to and say, look, this doesn't quite make sense.
Mm-hmm.
So if you guys have examples of those, pop them in the chat. And if you catch my eye, I will read them out. We can discuss them.
Cool.
TJ the Joyful says, literally my entire world. Well, TJ, this is the stream for you. Make sure you ask us some questions. In the meantime, Basic Dragon is pondering the uniforms of the plot hole police. So that's good.
Black circle as a badge.
That sucks in logic.
And light and everything else.
And
so
hope.
The next question.
Yes, absolutely. you mentioned creating for purpose. How do you record that important meta information, and are they part of the book that Trent was creating? Because Trent was talking about the book. Yes, the meta information is absolutely part of Trent's book. It's a massive part of his big world building textbook, which is called Collaborative World Building. Don't let the name textbook put you off. It's actually a very pleasant read. It's not heavy.
I wouldn't call it a textbook at all. Yeah.
Primer, guidebook.
Guide.
Yeah.
Guide.
It was wonderful. So how do you record important meta information about your world?
Well, it depends on what you're building, and it depends why you're building it. I would say that what I do right now, because this is about to change within the next coming months, but what I do is that when I start building a new world, I open up a generic article, which is private, and I start by writing my idea.
Yeah.
After spending some lines effectively talking about my idea, then I would expand it, understanding the logic behind what I'm trying to achieve, and I will break this down into the most important elements that I would like to explore in the world.
In terms of idea, you mean core concept, I guess.
Core concept, yeah, exactly. In some, not so many words, but yeah, effectively that. What about you?
I like to keep... So, first of all, I made a video about this, and I've been posting it a lot this month because it's so relevant, which was about 6 things you need to think about when you start world building. And that is scope. So, like, the scale of your world, how big it's going to be. Motivation, this is not in order. Genre, which is a useful guideline if nothing else. Theme, I'm definitely forgetting some of them. Help me out. You saw the video. We're both very tired.
Oh my gosh.
It's been a very long weekend.
It was a very interesting weekend.
Long and rigorous. So by considering these sort of meta ideas before you start building, it really, really helps make sure that you don't get world builder's disease. It helps make sure that the world you're creating serves your underlying motivation, whatever that motivation is. And it might be a personal motivation, or it might be an artistic motivation, or it might be both.
Yeah, fair enough.
So making sure that kind of meta is saved well done, Vil. It's what it's for. Well, absolutely what it's for.
Most certainly, it's never a question. I mean, the only thing I would say is that you should keep your notes when you start world building a new world as structured as possible.
Yeah.
Trend is giving an idea of how you should do it. We have some idea very well based on the Trend's idea. When you do that, actually, the microphone.
Glonk the microphone. Sorry for glonking the mic. I'll just hold the wine,
Maybe
and if I
that's
drink
a
it
very
all,
good idea.
well, lucky me.
Indeed.
Lucky you.
Lucky who?
Not lucky you.
Oh.
Lucky you. I get very entertaining when I've had lots of wine.
And also very, very, very annoying, but that's a different issue altogether. So,
sorry.
Yeah, I'd say
organised.
that keep your structure simple, keep your structure clean, and try to write, first of all, in the beginning of every section, if that's necessarily meta or the reason you're doing it, a single sentence that you can go back to and read to remind yourself what you're doing, and you can expand to it with the sentence later on, like with a paragraph underneath, and to give much more detail, or to link to articles you would be creating as you're building your world. Or I mean, I'm using it in many ways, in fact, to create sort of like a stable for all my art articles, like essentially my placeholders.
Oh yeah.
Because essentially you can say, for example, I have 3 gods, and the gods will be a thing, and then I would say that the god will be specialized because I have like music related magic kind of thing, and all of those will become articles for me later on.
Nice.
So that's a good way for me to study and see, okay, have I done this, have I done this, have I done this, have I done this. But the sentence on the top of this paragraph always keeps me essentially aligned. It's most like a mantra, like of the world kind of thing, saying, for example, in this world the important thing is magic, or in this world the important thing is the national relationships between countries, or in this world the important thing is to have flying ships and cannons.
That's a little bit the theme of your world.
Yeah, I mean, this was different sections I explored, but yeah.
Interesting. So those 6 tips I was talking about, that was motivation, genre, scale, mood, theme, and conflict. Thank you so much, TJ, for copying those through. That was incredibly helpful. Live and Learn has raised as an example of something which had some world-building plot holes was Bright, the 2017 Netflix movie. Live and Learn says...
that was an understatement.
To be more specific about Bright's problems, either you or Dimitris mentioned it earlier, introducing stuff without making it work together. What do you think about that?
For Bright?
Yeah.
Oh, very much so. I felt like the authors of Bright took parts from classic fantasy, like effectively Forgotten Realms,
yeah,
and then they took parts from Shadowrun, and then took parts from like Interview with the Vampire, and
they
like
put it in a cocktail shaker, and they went chaka chaka chaka.
Not even
cha,
that. No. It's like this like chunky soup of like big clumps of like concept that just flow together and sometimes happen to
It
me.
was genre soup, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I liked the movie. It was entertaining, but it was missing so many things, and the story was so disjointed.
I found it like that. I found it like a chunky soup, but when you finished it, you were like, "Huh, that was strangely unsatisfying." And it's because it didn't offer this sort of rigorousness of a world.
I don't know if
that
that's
made
the case.
Sense.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the case, but it felt like they're trying to make the series and they made a movie out of it.
Yeah.
Like it felt like there were so many things that were touched and never explained, and never expanded, never went through with that essentially.
There was a lot of sort of, and this is what this looks like in passing, and you were like, "Huh, yeah, but what and why and also
and what is the significance?
Exactly. Why am I seeing this?" And I mean, if there's something that you need to do in movies, it's be brief and pointed with what you show, because they're not long. It's true in books as well. You know, you have to absolutely make every word count, make every shot count.
Very
and
true.
One of the things that, again, we were discussing this month is that our audiences for all genres of world building are becoming more demanding. Our art is growing up, and our audiences are more sophisticated. They actually ask more than what has previously been delivered. So if you see, I don't know, a Conan the Barbarian movie from the 80s, it's just like grog, grog, magic, splash.
Yeah, because
stab.
everything was in the very beginning there, or at least it was still cult.
Yeah, totally.
Now,
You would never get a magic system described in
yeah,
in Conan the Barbarian. I mean, A, it's not the forum for it, but B, the audience wasn't interested in that.
Yeah,
it was so much more about the veneer of
fantasy and
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And fantasy is as a subversive genre, which, like, it's got its big boy pants on now.
And you see it also in the. I mean, I haven't played it, but I know that we have friends that play the MMO they did for Conan, for example. That there is a lot more detail added there, which was not anywhere in the original concept work they've done for Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah. But as Evan Arix says, they want compelling worlds, and it's something that people now demand.
Yeah, and they judge the body of work based on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Live and Learn, you're right. They showed a silhouette of the dragon, and they were like, "Look, dragons were there." No information about how you integrate a massive murderous reptile into a functioning society in which magic is a daily occurrence.
Exactly, yeah.
That's the story I want to know. I don't care about a magic foo-foo stick. How does the dragon, like, how does it work with flying dragon poop on citizens daily? Is there... I want to know about that stuff. That fascinates me. I mean, maybe not to the exclusion of everything else.
I think it felt like it was supposed to be a series. And maybe at this series at some point you could have seen like the scooping crew kind of thing, you know, like with the people who will gather the poop from the dragons, because it also has like pieces of metal in there, and they will have to refine it and make whatever they make out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a question here from Polovnik. Do you have advice about giving power and quirks to villains or nemesises? This was specifically with reference to Crystal Heart, but I think it's a good general question.
Mm-hmm.
How do you approach that? For me, it depends on the level of baddie, in a way,
Well, you see,
and their role.
that's the thing. When I think nemesis or villain, I don't think of their powers.
Mm.
I think that is more important when you create a character like that to talk about their requirements. What do they need? Why are they doing what they're doing?
Yeah.
What led them there? Because that's all the juice is. Because, it's like describing a very angry individual without any reason and describing a person who is essentially trying to kill all the men because he has daddy problems. That is more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that their powers or the source of their power can either be their hindrance, apart from being their power, of course, because it's a power kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it also can be effectively related to their story or effectively be related to how they understand the world. So, for example, an anti-hero, villain or whatever else you're going to call it, who portrays himself as somebody who's very rich and he wants to show off the riches, the chances are that this is because at some point in their life they didn't have any of that.
Yeah.
Like this is coming from humble beginnings kind of thing, and they're angry with the world because they killed their mother, they let their mother die, whatever. I mean, this is the beauty of describing villains, I think, that finding the reasons behind what they're doing, finding the story, the source of where they're coming from, and how you can leverage that to make them a more live, more interactive, and more passionate character in your world.
Yeah, and eventually more terrifying.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
We've said it again and again. We touched on it in yesterday's stream when we were talking with Guy and Till from Dungeon Fog and from How to Be a Great GM, was that the scariest villains are the most believable, and the most believable villains are the ones with clear motivations, and often motivations that aren't bad.
Yes.
I mean, they're doing bad things because they're the villain. So one would imagine that if your characters are on the side of good, the villain is on the side of not good, or at least morally ambiguous enough that the reader is siding with your
Which,
PCs.
again, it's a matter of perspective.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
And it is a very interesting thing because, for example, if I remember correctly from Pathfinder, Cheliax's Empire, which is supposed to be one of the offshoots of the big empire that used to be before it collapsed,
Yeah.
they are effectively ruled by demons.
Yeah.
And that was a very interesting idea. So, demons, devils, yeah, devils, yeah.
Lawful evil.
Lawful evil, exactly.
Whichever one is lawful evil.
Yeah, devil, it's devil. And I found very interesting because effectively they are not evil in their everyday life. And
Yeah.
they are evil people. They're like they are the overlords essentially, but the way that they are perceived by the people in the Cheliax Empire is not about evil. It's about effectively law. It's about contracts. It's a harsh empire, a harsh world that they live in, but it's not the definition of evil. Like I'm gonna kill you without a reason, kind of thing.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
This is a different understanding, and it's because of that premise.
Yeah.
Essentially, they are devils. They believe in contracts. They believe essentially in harsh punishment if a contract is broken. Yeah. They believe in law.
Absolutely, and that's the real thing. It's about law.
Yeah, exactly, and harsh law.
Yeah.
But law nonetheless. So, don't run around saying, okay, evil people should do bad things because they're bad, because that is not how it works.
Yeah.
Unless they are mentally insane, like they have issues that go beyond cognition of what normal is,
right.
or sociopaths, because that's the other thing you can actually get.
Exactly.
There is a reason behind it.
Yeah, totally.
And that's the beauty. That's where you can make your players have a hard time, not with the amount of hit points that the person has or how hard is it for him to die, but how do you break them and how do they break you?
Yeah, absolutely. No, and that makes great stories.
Oh, most certainly, yeah.
I would like to say a quick hello to Kizumi TSC, hello, who's a very, very new guild member. We are chatting about Worldbuilding Scaffolding. integrating your laws and your concepts of world building so that they make sense and they make a complete network of a world, and avoiding world building plot holes because nobody likes them.
No, they don't.
No. We've also been chatting about examples of world building plot holes, and we've invited you guys to bring them on so we can discuss them. We have one here from Haiti, I'm guessing, but I don't think there's another name similar, so you'll know who you are. A plot hole I noticed was in Fallout 4, in which you fight the Institute if you are playing as Minutemen, which doesn't really make sense because the Institute actually has no reason to attack them. But at the same time, the Minutemen don't battle the Brotherhood of Steel, which are oppressing the inhabitants of the Commonwealth.
Yeah. It is a very interesting dynamic they try to weave there. I don't know. Have you played Fallout 4 so much?
I got a certain extent. I got partway through, and then I just ran out of time. Plus, I'm still playing Skyrim. Skyrim for the win!
I like Fallout 4 because, as with Skyrim, the factions are not black and white and grey.
Yeah.
They have facets, and they have to do with positioning and understanding of how the world works. And all of them are trying to achieve the same thing, more or less, but they're trying to do it a different way. And they're absolutely right. There were a lot of plot holes about when it comes to the relationships that the factions themselves had, because the Brotherhood of Steel, and I was actually something, it was hard for me in the game to also kind of swallow as a pill, because I like the idea of the metallic huge knight of Brotherhood of Steel who's going around as cavalrying and taking care of business and helping people being good, but at the same time the missions that you have as a Brotherhood of Steel was in fact to essentially subjugate settlements. So at least that's how it was presented. It was the idea effectively that you are with us or you are against us kind of thing. Well, the Minutemen were the happy-go-lucky kind of thing. The Minutemen remind me a lot of... Do you remember this movie, The Postman?
Yes, with Kevin Costner.
Exactly. That's what they reminded me. It was effectively the happy-go-lucky people who kind of misguided, maybe a bit more underdogs, but essentially they meant well.
Yeah.
But they had also their own agendas kind of thing, and they were not perfect or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Institute was effectively the Institute was in fact the idea of the evil person who's trying to destroy the world to make it better.
Yeah, that's true.
And
was very keep forgetting his name. Talos. No.
Thanos.
Thanos.
Yes, it was very...
Yesterday I called him Kronos, so I'm getting closer.
Closer. But yes, that's the idea. And you see, I mean, it is a different kind of structure of evil or good or whatever. And it's absolutely true that the plot hole there is that they didn't really understood how the relationships should have worked between those.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We've got an interesting question here from El Eterno. Casual.
Cool.
What RPG system do you mostly use to adapt the magic systems of your worlds if you ever do? Now, we are talking world building plot holes, so let's weave that in as well.
Okay. I'll explain my answer before I actually give you the answer.
All right.
Magic is one of those fundamental forces that govern your world, like physics, like the existence of an afterlife, like the existence or not of life after death, like unlife, in fact, because it's not the same thing with afterlife. Yeah, afterlife means that you don't die, you go to another good place, and life means that you can be dead but still alive, kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah.
Or the concept effectively of gravity, or the basic physics. Based on that, I would say that the system, especially for magic, more than possibly most of the other mechanics, it will affect which system you're using.
Yeah.
Because it can make so many big fundamental changes to your world.
Yeah.
That it can make it unrecognizable. Like for me, as we discussed yesterday, one of my pet peeves is the fact that the Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition and previous editions understanding of magic, they never consider the laws of thermodynamics and conservation of energy, which effectively means that for me that's a huge plot hole.
Yeah.
Because once you enchant a sword with something, for some reason the magic never goes away.
Yeah.
They do have ones that apparently, if I remember, I don't even remember if that's the case for 5th edition, but it was for the previous editions, that they had charges.
Yeah. I think they still do in 5e.
The ones.
Yeah.
But why not the weapons, for example? Yeah. Or, you know what I mean? It's like, it is that weird understanding that some things are just broken. They just work.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Like, for all you know, you can get a flame sword, activate it, put it underneath a pot of water,
boil the water continuously, and
then
start
you have
the
a steam
steam
engine.
revolution.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Although some magic items have a time duration on the effect.
Yeah, but not all of them.
No, not all of them, not by any means.
And as I think that is because the magic system they have created does not consider that. Does not consider effectively the expenditure of energy for an equal or not so equal result.
Yeah, exactly. And I love 5e. I love Dungeons and Dragons. I really, really enjoy the world and the concepts and everything. But it's full of plot holes like that.
Yeah, but also
things like if this is something Guy raised as a concept about how to design a castle. If you if there are so many ways to attack you from the air, like dragons and flying unicorns, celestial unicorns, and hippogriffs and griffins and everything else, you don't build a castle above ground. You build your castle underground where the flying things can't get you.
Yeah.
You know.
I did the same thing in Lyra, you know, when I was designing the Lyra, and I was, in fact, I did build castles off the ground because I have flying ships.
Yeah.
So you can say, but you know, flying ships. Why would you actually build castles on top of the ground?
Because
well,
underground as well.
Sorry.
Well, you've got flying islands, which means there's a limit to the amount of underground you've got.
There's a lot of depth, in fact, and there are structures that are underground or effectively on the side of the island. In there, you in fact saw one in the first campaign we played.
That's true.
Which was like kind of like a window out, like a gateway for the sky ship to get to actually go there.
A port. Yeah.
A port, exactly. It's a nice idea because it's quite protected. There is only one way in, kind of thing. Yeah. But there are reasons for you to have light. First of all, because you are human, you cannot live underground. No. Secondly, it's much more expensive to build underground.
That's true.
And thirdly, you can adapt your castles. You can create, for example, turrets. And you can have ballistas that, in fact, they're not made to look downwards and left, right, but they're made to look in a 360 or like essentially 960 kind of like spherical. How do you call it? Like almost like a telescope. Imagine.
Sure.
Like
so you have the full range essentially.
Yes, exactly, and that could solve that.
Absolutely. Guys, remember, if you're writing questions in the chat, preface your question with the word question in capital letters so we can see it. I can see them coming in just about because I am paying attention just about. But as I drink more wine, I will stop seeing your questions. So make sure you do that. We've got a good one here from Kaijatan98. Do you think divine creation / gift as an explanation is a plot hole?
No. But it depends on your gods.
So there's something that Brandon Sanderson talks about, which is the better understood your magic is, the more you can use it to solve problems. So you cannot solve a plot problem with magic that your reader does not understand.
Yes, because
that is an ASPL. Exactly. You can have the magic make things worse. Absolutely. That's a great way to use magic in terms of driving the story forward. You can have the magic create effects. You can have it create wonder. You can even have it solve small problems if it has been established that it can do that. But you cannot have it solve a major plot point
if you haven't explained
exactly
how it
unless
works.
You've explained the rules of the magic, and that starts to get into hard magic and soft magic. So absolutely use divine magic, use a gift of the gods, but make sure either if it's important, if it's pivotally important, you explain it.
Yeah, because a gift from the gods, and okay, I might be wrong there, but if you consider a gift from the gods, a gift is something that is given from somebody to somebody that tells two things about the world. The gods interact,
Which means they probably have agendas.
and probably they're alive. And B, in order to give you a gift means that they create relations. Because why would you give a gift? Like, something should be given in return,
Yeah.
or there was another reason for it. To say that you could just build... that's the thing that I love and hate. It's like, it's the child that was born in a special night that essentially got the gift to the gods. And I was like, yeah, like it's like saying that the god is like Santa Claus. One day a year, it's like ho ho ho, merry presents kind of thing. Here you are, 5
Merry destiny!
plus 5 wisdom to you, and 5 intelligence to you too, kind of thing, you know. Yeah. So think why the gift is given. Think what are you trying to do with that gift, and why is it important to the story.
Yeah.
And if you answer these questions, you can do it, of course. I mean,
Yeah. Basic Dragon has called me out with Sanderson's first law of magic. An author's ability, and I would argue this is a world builder's or a GM's ability as well, to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic. That's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yes. So I would always say, if you're worried about something, if you're worried it might look like a plot hole, dig into it and start coming up with reasons why.
Yeah.
Those reasons don't have to make sense if they're the reasons of gods. They only have to make sense to the god, and they have to be understood by the people.
Yeah, you can always use the excuse of like, oh, this is like too high for you to understand.
Yeah, or
But-
this is a mad god.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
As long as you won't base your whole world or your novella or your novel based on that, because then you are just making a lame work. Like,
Unless you go, this, because mad god, and now the story starts. You establish the premise. The reason is because mad god, or
Yeah.
because divine ineffability, or whatever.
it's
And then you spin your story. But remember, you have now foreshadowed this, whatever this is. That means it's understood to a degree.
yeah, fair enough.
Now you can spin your story. We have had an absolutely great question here, which is, hello Walrus. Yes, we've had a great day, thank you. There's some very funny stuff coming up in the chat. Where is that question? Here. Do you have a checklist of things that every world absolutely needs when you start building a world? Very interesting question there from Adequate Travesty. Good name.
Things that every world needs. If there is one, and again, I'm repeating myself. If there is one thing you should have for your world, is a reason for having it.
Yeah.
And write it down. That I would say that a reason that you start building your world will give you answers to many more questions that you think, because it will provide guidance for you. I do that when I start building a world. The first thing I do is either in a notebook, or like in my notes, or in my World Anvil generic articles I discussed,
Yeah.
or sometimes even in how do you call those?
Post-its.
Post-it note. I will write down why am I doing. I don't even know what it shows. This post-it.
I do.
Okay.
That's why I'm not worried.
Okay.
We've just had a weekend full of very sensitive discussions and
That's what I was
secret
like.
information, and then I showed a post-it, and Dimitris was like, no, you're giving away all the secrets. It's fine. There are no secrets on that post-it.
Good.
You're all good.
So as I was saying, sometimes when I'm like into the thick of it and I'm starting, I will create a post and I will say, for example, I'm building this world because X.
Nice. Motivation.
Motivation, exactly. And the other thing that the world should have is probably, well, there are very simple things. They should have a history.
Yeah.
It should have an understanding of how, not it was created, but what is the understanding of the world from the eyes of the people living in it.
Yes.
Because
Boots on the ground.
yes, because the people who will be reading your book, or the players that will be playing in your world, will be part of those people.
Yeah.
And if you have not established this base of how it feels to be in this world, no matter how beautiful you describe it, you will never create this sense of wonder for the people who are supposed to be interacting with it.
That's a really good point. Yeah, absolutely. I would say my checklist for what should be in a world when you start building is motivation, genre, scale, mood, theme, and conflict. Is what I was just talking about before. That's for you. That's not for your readers. They will never see that. It's not important for them.
They will see the impact
exactly.
of it.
They will see the symptoms of the fact that you know what your theme is and your genre. You know what your motivation is, which is going to keep you going, and it's going to refine where your world building efforts go, so you don't accidentally build a thing that you don't need. One of the other things we've been talking about this month a lot, as I said before, with Nate from the Worldbuilding School, with Professor Trent Hergenrader, and also with Aran Eviram from Crystal Heart, is the idea of world UX. Why are you building your world? What are you building it for? Not in terms of motivation, not in terms of personal motivation. Is it a world for a book?
You mean
is it
built for purpose, essentially?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And make sure that as you advance with your project, it remains built for purpose. Thank you. That's a very useful piece of terminology that I was searching for. And then, again, as Dimitris says, make sure it has a history. I would argue figure out the natural laws next. If you want magic... Oh, sorry, yes?
We actually wrote an article about it.
Is that a Lost Kingdom one?
It is in Lost Kingdom, yeah. So if you go to lostkingdom.net, which is our original project, there is a checklist, I think, of 12 things that you should have when you start building your world.
Huh.
We did not have the introduction of meta in there, I think, and the idea of motivation. It was more structural information of what the world needs from terms of geography, religions, social dynamics. But these are kind of like a checklist for after you establish what it's supposed to be, why you're building it, then it's actually what do you need to build to have a world that feels like a world for people who are exploring it, kind of thing.
Totally.
So if one of our amazing producers can find that, it should be easy to find. It's a 2 articles, how do you call it? Series.
On lostkingdom.net.
Yes.
So, as I was saying, I think natural law is something that you need to think about very early. And there's something that serious world building theorists talk about when we're talking about paracosms and this sort of very academic approach to world building. This is my academia voice. Do you like it?
It is quite concerning.
My most serious voice for most serious topics. So, as I continue, when one is talking about paracosms, and that is these sort of fictional worlds, as you may know them, yes, one conceives of first world, that's Earth for you and me, and, the world that we live in.
Well, it's Mars for you, but yeah, it's fine.
So the world that we live in, the everyday world that we live in, when one considers one's paracosm, one begins to think about what differs from first world, that is, Earth. And as you start thinking about this kind of stuff, you start considering, does gravity work the same? Do I have magic? Do I have more than one sapient species? Because that's a big introduce, and you need to figure out how that works. Because we don't have that on First Earth. This is where you start talking about the big tenets of your world that's going to impact everything else. Because I would, sorry, if I can finish, I would argue that you can't think about the history of your world until you've figured out how many sapient species you are describing the history of.
It is much harder than people think.
Yeah.
Because, first of all, I would say that 95% of science fiction and fantasy has multiple sentient species there. Yeah. But I have never, to this date, including my worlds, haven't seen a reasoning behind why evolutionary change and evolutionary drives haven't in fact killed off the rest of the species apart from one which managed to survive.
Which is exactly what happened on First World. Exactly. On our world, on Earth.
We don't know if there was other...
we know that there were Neanderthals. We know that there was...
Australopithecus.
Homo habitalis, I think it was, which is... they call them hobbit people. It's a horrific misnomer, but it's basically another form of sapient Homo sapien type thing that looks like it was bipedal, looks like it was developing sapience. We found remains. They tend to be quite short, and stocky, which is why they were nicknamed hobbits. I can't remember all the details of that, but
But
I can go look that up.
That is one of the things that people don't understand, that if you have prime predators to the point of achieving sapience, which means that they in fact have motivation behind their actions and they're not led just by instinct, because that's one of the big differences between animals and sapiens, is the fact that you stop just adhering to your instincts and you have agendas.
Yeah.
The moment the population start to grow, the first thing you do is probably purge anyone who is not you.
Yeah.
So the question is, why does this world tend to are able to have so many populations? I mean, is it like they are very primordial and they haven't met each other just yet?
Yeah. It could be a case of land barriers or other kind of geographical barriers, which means they haven't met each other. I mean,
but the thing is that it's okay if they haven't met each other, but the moment you have a world and you say, yes, we have elves and we have humans and they have dwarves and they all know each other, the meeting part happened already.
Yeah, no, of course. But I'm exploring the space in which you have these more primitive sapient species developing. Yeah. We have Pangaea in our world as a concept, but that might not be the case for your world in terms of geography. So, these are the kinds of things that you can start to consider, and that's going to get you a much more integrated and eventually a much more unique world.
Indeed.
Because you're following the logic train, which is, I would argue, the best way to avoid world building plot holes.
Yeah.
Is don't spawn too many different things and follow the logic train.
And to give you an answer of how this can happen and why it can happen, consider a game of Stellaris. The only reason that one of the species hasn't destroyed the other is probably because there is a balance of power, or there are physical reasons that prevent you from being able to effectively exterminate or subjugate the people around you. I mean, that's the other thing you don't see a lot of in fantasy. Subjugated species.
Yeah, it's true.
Like, if you say that your world is 90% humans and 10% elves, why the humans don't actually just, subjugate the elves?
That's something they have in Skyrim, in fact. The Argonians were a subjugated species,
exactly.
And now they are not, and they are newly not subjugated. And one of the things I enjoyed so much about that franchise is exploring that sort of racial bias and racial anger, in a way, and the relationships that exist in a world with a post-subjugated species. I thought it was fantastic. We've got some great questions here. Mm-hmm. Here's a fantastic one. If you get caught up in the fluff for a while, as in getting lost in world building, and now you have a mess of mismatched ideas, what should you do? Do you have any tips for sorting through the mess?
First of all, I don't like referring to as a fluff.
You're a fluff.
I know that the word fluff comes from people who probably play Warhammer 40k, by the way. I don't know whose question is that.
It was live and learn.
Yeah, it's a very common way of describing that when you talk about that, because fluff denotes that this is not the reason you're doing what you're doing. That's the whole point behind fluff. Essentially, if you're gonna play a war game for miniature games, and then the rest is just to essentially add fluff and make the books bigger. But in world building, we're talking about fluff. We're talking about information, and the information is how do you architect your information, how do you structure it, and how you organize it, how you make it accessible, so the parts that are important are more visible than the parts that can give flavor, without imposing to the structure of your world. Yeah. So to go back to the question, and can you please read it to me again? Because I was caught up with fluff, and I was like I had a little bit of anger in there.
Now that Dimmy has purged himself of the anger over fluff, let's hope it's not flammable. If you get caught up in fluff for a while, as in getting lost in world building, and now have a mess of mismatched ideas, what should you do? Any tips for sorting through the mess?
So, one of the things I do, because for those that know me, you know very well that I do not have so much time to world build. So when I do world build, I do end up writing articles which can be mismatched and disorganized. Yeah. What I do is that the first thing I do is I take all the articles or categories that I'm not exactly sure where they're supposed to go. I create a category called uncategorized, and I throw everything in there. And after that, I go through my initial construction, my introduction.
Yeah.
I read through it and try to understand, first of all, what drove me to create these categories, not the articles, the categories. And I see these categories, in fact, have a reason to be there and how high they should be in the hierarchy of the world. And then if they are important, they are moved outside of the uncategorized category and into essentially a better structure of how the world should appear. And then I go through the articles that are in a categorized category and either pull them into where they are supposed to, or create essentially categories of assumption underneath the uncategorized. And say, for example, things possibly to add to culture, things to possibly add to species, things to possibly add to technology, kind of thing. And I leave them there. So I always prefer that the visible part of the world is the cleanest and the clearest, and then I start exploring again. I take this step back by clearing it out effectively, not deleting things, just moving them away, and then go and re-add possibly under other articles, because that's the other thing we've introduced in Worldbuilding and I love it because I'm using it, not for any other reason, the ability to have articles which only appear under an article.
Sure, so articles nested beneath articles.
Exactly, because then they become mostly supplementary information than anything else, and a further reading kind of
it's also a great way to stop your article being this long.
Exactly.
Which is hard to read, both for you as somebody referring to your own material, and for anyone who's reading your world, any audience. Some interesting questions. Many interesting questions. Yes, I have seen the videos on High Magic and Soft Magic by Hello Future Me. They are very interesting. Surely plot holes are the equivalent of an unexpected observation that opens the door to something else. The black body problem, for example, led to quantum physics. Is it a plot hole or an insight? It's all about how we react to it and take it forward. Not exactly a question, but I would... That is
more of a statement.
Right, that is a statement, not a question.
It is a good statement, and effectively the idea is that you can always find opportunity in failure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it is very true. And in the real world, as they said, effectively, yes, sometimes we stumble upon something that we thought to be mistaken, apparently is like, holy crap, it is essentially, an opening. It's the out of the box thinking kind of thing. I would say that in the real world that can have a lot of value because there are secrets that you do not know about. In your world, you kind of become tangential because at that point you are being asked and you are asking yourself, how can I fix this by changing my original concept?
Right. I would say if it's an unexpected observation, that's fine. There are two questions. The one, why hasn't somebody leveraged this yet?
By somebody,
because
you mean
anybody in world.
Yeah.
Because if there's something that I could tell you about humans, it is if they see something that they can leverage, that is make money on, use to their advantage in any way, they are going to do that. That is how people work on a fundamental level. So my question is always, why hasn't somebody leveraged this yet? That's why I always wonder why castles are built up in D&D 5e, as Guy raised the question. And so it's very, very important to think about this. It can be that nobody's noticed it yet. It can be that it's something that people haven't come across yet in terms of scientific discovery or magical discovery or whatever it is. But that is always my prime question when you have some source of power, as you said, things like the ever-burning sword. Yeah. Why has this not fueled the steam revolution yet?
Well, the first answer would be, of course, because nobody have thought about it yet, which is a fair assumption, but there are other things you can do, like become a pyromaniac and burn everything in your ground to the ground effectively.
Yeah. We have a question from Shy Red Panda, which looks like it might be missing part of it. The question is, what if you are following along with a character as they figure out how they got these powers and what they do? So what we're referring to there is the outsider learning curve. This is a phenomenon used in narrative of all sorts throughout history, but it's best known from Harry Potter. Harry Potter is the outsider who's being introduced to the world of magic, and what that means is that the audience learns as Harry Potter learns. And that's a great way to introduce your world. But I'm not sure how that refers to world-building plot holes. And
I don't think that's a question. Is that a question?
it is a question, but I don't know. It's phrased like a question.
Okay, yeah, but I know, but I don't understand what is the relation. Anyway.
I
yeah,
am not sure. We've got a good question here. How do you keep the balance between non-magical and magical races? This is from Burn in Laz.
Yeah. The answer to that is something that many have played with. It's like the question of how do you make sure that somebody who has a magic cannot conquer everybody else around them. And you will be touching on that. We will be touching on that in the months to come with the porcelain argument.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. That's coming.
Yeah. But I think that in many ways the answer is math. And math, and by math I mean life math. Essentially the idea that if you have magic, there is something else that you are lacking, or you're a super powerful race and probably you have conquered everybody else already. But if you consider that all races in some way have equal power, or at least a very close equal power in general, the other race would have something else. Like, for example, it might be that you're a magical race, that your birth rate is very low, so you're not as many compared to the humans that breed like bunnies kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or you might have magic, but the dwarves have effectively super advanced technology and the ability to effectively block your magic by the means of metallurgy, for example, or by the means of whatever this might be. So it is always the answer to most of the questions about why that exists and why haven't you taken over that is because everything in nature and everything in world building is an arms race.
Yes.
If this arms race is not followed by everyone, you get extinct.
Yeah.
If you're still here, there is a reason for it, and the reason is that at some point, somehow, you're balancing out the external forces which are competing for the same resources with you.
Absolutely. And something Rotsoy has added is make the magical race technophobic. And I would argue there's all sorts of ways to do this that follow that vein of thought, which is, yes, they have magic, that's a perk, give them a negative. This is a great way to add balance to your different races, to your different civilizations. Yes, they live really, really long, but they don't breed very often. For example,
living really long is not a benefit. I don't know how many times I have to say that. It is a benefit for the individual.
Sure.
As a race is a curse.
Okay.
For so many reasons. For the ability to grow children, for the ability... Okay, yes, you have more transmittance of knowledge, but there is a limit that this actually becomes a problem. Not to mention you have to pay 100 million pounds a year for your pensions of your elves that are like 5,000 years old. They're still hanging around kind of thing. What do you think elves left for Arvandor? Like, people were like, I cannot pay for your pension anymore, dude. Get the hell out of here.
I always think of Arvandor as like the Florida of Middle Earth.
Yes, exactly.
It's where the elves go to get old and chill out and play canasta.
Yeah, because it's like, okay, you work until 600, then you have another 400 years of just hanging around and sucking the energy out of the young generation. Then at some point people were like, you know what? Enough is enough.
Yeah.
Go to Arvandor now.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, sorry, I thought you were done.
Sorry, no, I was not done. That was the joke here. But I'd say that consider why this race is still... I mean, if magic, and because that's also an assumption, is such a powerful force, because it might not be. Let's say that you have high fantasy magic. It's a very powerful force, it can do everything. Cool, that's fine. And I'm guessing that a race which is magical means that it's a race that has easier access to magic.
Yeah.
Or they are more, essentially they have easier ways to either learn or either manifest magic kind of thing. That's what I would consider a magical race. What is the difference between them and the rest of the inhabitants of this world?
Yeah.
And why, as I said before, you haven't either enslaved the rest or not?
Yeah, absolutely. So Shy Red Panda has come back to us and said, sorry, I was trying to understand. By the way, you do not need to apologise. Not at all.
Yeah, it's fine.
We didn't understand your question. That's not a problem. Twitch is not the perfect medium to do this, but we enjoy it and you guys enjoy it, which is the main thing. So, I was trying to understand how to explain the magic or powers in my world without the characters having full knowledge of the magic. Oh, that's such a good idea.
That's a great question.
Such a great question.
So, it depends on the type of magic, right?
Okay.
First of all.
Yeah, for sure.
What was this okay?
I was just about to jump in, but go ahead.
Jump
No.
in, please,
You
please
started,
do.
so finish.
I talked a lot. Please do.
No, please. Please, come on. You started now, so go.
It depends on the type of magic.
Mm-hmm.
If the magic is a magic that needs to be, you need to be educated into it. Like you have to be a wizard that needs to learn spells or incantations. It will be harder if you don't understand the nature of magic.
Mm.
But also, in many ways, from our world as well, I'll put it that way. If I throw a rock, you don't have to know that gravity exists for the rock to fall.
Yeah.
In addition to that, when Isaac Newton found a way to describe how and why this rock falls,
Yeah.
he was kind of right,
Yeah.
and many things start to make sense, but quantum physics was not even an idea back then, and we know that at least quantum physics is closer to the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So, interesting enough, Newton was passing himself for a mage in that discussion, but you don't need to have perfect understanding of magic in order to be able to cast magic.
Mm-hmm.
As the same way as you can throw a rock without understanding gravity, or you can in fact calculate better where the fall will rock if you do know about gravity.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing the deeper the knowledge it is, the more you understand.
Mm-hmm.
That is only for a world that requires knowledge to do magic. If the magic is something that either comes like Ursula Le Guin from knowing the name of something and having the force and the will of power to effectively command it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Then it's a matter of understanding, essentially having a knowledge or like having the ability to understand the words that you're doing there, as you did with your world as well in many ways. And finally, there are worlds that actually magic is just a raw force, and it's literally just a matter of will, which does not require any knowledge to exercise it. It requires knowledge or willpower to command it and to mold it to what you want it to be. It's essentially the difference between wild magic and magic which is under your command.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm going to say there's another approach, which is the narrative approach in terms of explaining the magical powers in a world for a character that doesn't have full knowledge of the magic. They observe, and your audience observes. So whoever your audience is, I don't know if you're writing a role-playing game campaign, I don't know if you're writing a novel. I suspect from the way you phrase the question, you are writing a book or a sort of narrative prose world rather than an RPG world. You can have them observe and then have your reader deduce, if you understand. So your character doesn't have to understand, but your reader can understand the implications by what your character observes. And I think that's the way in which you give your audience more information. That's how you do that, is through the lens of the character's eyes. You also, there's a lot to be said for the sense of wonder. So you see a repeating effect. You see an effect once, which is then foreshadowed which is foreshadowed and then used at a critical moment. The fact that it's been foreshadowed means that you can use it at a critical moment and the audience understands that this has been foreshadowed, this thing works like that.
Well, they don't understand it was foreshadowed, they just accept it as law because it was already...
That's exactly what it means by foreshadowed. And so the audience understands, the character understands, but they don't necessarily need to know why. They just know that it is a given because the player character has experienced that as fact, or the POV character has experienced that as fact. And actually, in a soft magic system, that's a great way to use magic and keep the sense of wonder that a soft magic system gives. So I would argue they don't necessarily have to know that it's midichlorians or that it's exactly Wingardium Leviosa and the wand is held like this and used like this. it's enough that you have foreshadowed the effect, so there is precedent within the story that it works like this, and you maintain the sense of wonder. So that is what I would say on that score. We are running out of time. We have been having so much fun. Yes, exactly. Chekhov's magic. Thank you, Secondhand.
Chekhov's.
Just let us have. Yes, it's for a novel. You're like me. Yes.
My condolences.
We have time for one more question, and that is going to be the closer. This is a question from A Dream for Nevermore. How do you keep magical races and magic from becoming too powerful? Now, this is something we touched on a little bit already in terms of the balance of magical and non-magical races, but OP magic is often a really tricky thing. How do you tackle this?
Well, I'm a very special case because you know very well that in my world, I like to get very specific on how magic works. So, OP or not, if magic has rules that really needs to abide by, it means that there are ways to counter it.
Nice.
So, I put it that way, in my world, in fact, there is no limitation on how powerful one can become. Apart from time, knowledge, and desire to do so.
Yeah.
The issue is that where do you find the energy?
Yeah.
And how do you make sure that you don't get burned down in the process?
Yeah.
So, for me, the limitation is the law of thermodynamics for magic, which effectively is the idea that, you know, there is a limited amount of magic.
Yeah.
And you are a conduit, so at any given point, you are only able to channel literally through you a specific amount of magic.
Yeah.
And to have control over it on that. Effectively, you can channel a lot of magic for a very instantaneous effect, or a lot of magic for, little magic for a more continuous effect.
Mm-hmm.
But during this time, you serve as a conduit, which means you can get burned down, get tired. You can. There are.
So essentially, what you're saying is make sure there's a cost, and make sure the cost.
Well, cost is one of way of controlling it, yeah. But also, I think understanding the magic system will give you the answers to how it works, because it's not the only magic system. There are many other magic systems.
Yeah.
And I think that the understanding of how it's built and why it's worked like that. For example, if you had divine magic.
Yeah.
You have limitators. Even if the gods are able to do divine magic because, you know, gods, and they can do whatever they want to that, you might not just get the acceptance of the gods. Mm-hmm. Like, you might say, you know, you're not worthy enough, or, you know, you don't get access to that toy just yet because you haven't proven to me that you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all very good points. Fantastic. All right, I said that was the last question, but there is one World Anvil technical question that we're going to answer right now from Rotswoy.
Oh, yeah?
Are there any plans to make system agnostic stat blocks for World Anvil? You can already do that.
What does this mean? Yes, exactly. You can do
that. Is already a feature. If you want to learn more, go to the help channel of Discord, or check out the World Anvil Codex where you can find details on how to do that. That is already a feature. World Anvil has and always will be system agnostic, genre agnostic, everything agnostic, because we want to support all kinds of world builders. So yes, you can already. Off you go, have fun. Alright, with that, I think we should turn off the stream so we can drink the rest of the bottle of wine in private. Ha ha ha.
That sounded like fun. Guys, thank you very much for being here with us today. It was really nice. I'm really sorry we were a bit subdued, but it was a very tiring 3 days.
Yes, we have had a very, very serious week, and in conference with Till from Dungeon Fog and with Guy from How to Be a Great GM. And it has been wonderful. It has been very long days of being serious.
Well, it is the first time in my life that I had a 3 days long meeting. I'm not even kidding. The only thing we stopped for, kinda,
was food. And even then we kept talking about stuff.
Exactly. And then sleep. Because the guys would come here in the morning at 8 o'clock in the morning and continue working until 10 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah.
That was pretty much it.
Yeah, it's been super serious.
Super serious, super exciting things.
Yeah, definitely. Lots of cool stuff to come.
And I cannot talk about that all, but things will come soon.
Absolutely. So guys, thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you for your questions. That's exactly what these fourth week streams are about.
It was so very nice to have so many questions today. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And they were really good questions,
yes, very, very good questions. Thank you very much, guys. And thank you for taking the time of thinking them, and thank you for bringing them to us, because it's always fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And otherwise it would just be me and Dimitris sitting here drinking wine and chatting. So great. Thank you. if you want to catch this again, I will be putting up on the YouTube, where you can find the whole stream of the theme of the month streams from February. They'll be all coming up soon, and that's the whole series about world building plot holes, integrating it's been a very long week.
Integrating.
That is the whole series of world building plot holes, integrating natural and supernatural laws, and basically making sure that your worlds make sense. So check that out, all upcoming on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/worldanvil. If you're on YouTube right now, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm saying that for the future.
For the future, people.
For the future. So guys, if you're up for some live roleplay, then stay with us. We're going to go on a raid. Our raid shout is Light Up the Forge. But in the meantime, we are going to grab our hammers and go world build. Or actually, we're probably going to drink wine.
I think we are.
We're going to drink wine.